everybody. Welcome to the Game Junkie Show. I'm your host, Crystal. Let me introduce you to today's fantastic guests. Everyone, please welcome back Elegant.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And Logiq.
Hey, yo, hey, yo.
So check it out. This is a very special episode because this is kicking off season 2. If you can believe it, I'm so freaking stoked. So excited. So let's get this underway. So anyway, this was actually Elegant's idea. He said, we should put a small panel together of people who have a background in business consulting and data analysis and talk about the Microsoft acquisition from that perspective rather than the traditional talk that we see a lot on Twitter of talking about it from a gamer's perspective. And one of the things that we noticed is this is a very sensationalized topic, of course. Lots of media outlets are covering on it, and there's been a lot of misinformation, and I feel like some of this may or may not be intentional in order to get clicks, and there's a lot of clout chasing that occurs online. So depending where you're getting your information from, a lot of people may have a lot of misunderstandings about things, and some people may have some fear-based concerns. So the goal today is, as always, to have fun and hope that we can kind of bring some informative and educational pieces to it. Again, this is just our opinion. We're not industry insiders. I'm going to let you in on a little secret, though. Jim is not really our father, and Phil isn't really our uncle. So we don't have super top secret information here. Elegant, I would like to start with you. And I think, because this is a word that we're seeing all the time, I think it would be awesome if you could help people understand what is a monopoly.
Oh, that's such a good question, because a monopoly could be a lot of different things. And there are different forms of monopolies. There could be actually legalized monopolies to, like, for example, here in Sweden, you can't buy liquor unless you buy it from one chain that are owned by the state, because Sweden has historically had a problem with too much drinking. So that's why. And it also brings a lot of money to, the government, which then helps funding whatever schools and hospitals and etc. So yeah, monopoly, I think when people are talking about it online, I think they're talking about it as this one entity that pushes everyone else out, and they're not allowed in, and they just own everything. I think people sort of thought that Netflix were going that way, but now we've seen like Disney Plus, etc., popping up. So I think it's tough to say what exactly a monopoly is, because it could be multiple different things. But I think in this context, what people mean is that basically, early days Microsoft and their operating system Windows, where they killed that market for everyone else. They owned it, and if you didn't have Windows, you were nothing, basically. I mean, of course, there were Apple, but Windows on the PC market, they really had a death grip on it. And I think that's what people are referring to here. And yeah, that could be a monopoly where they just, you have to be on Game Pass to be in the gaming sphere, so to speak, to be in the eyes of gamers. You could actually argue that Valve sort of are, they have some monopolistic tendencies with Steam, because if you're not on Steam, you sort of have trouble. And a lot of companies have used that to, they do workarounds where they launch their own launcher, but you do launch it via Steam. Yeah, so long answer to that question, but a monopoly could be so many things. But I think in this context, what we should refer to is, that company that the power is so centralized that no one else could compete on their level, or could, exist in that space without catering to that entity. And yeah, I don't think that's where this is going. And why that is, I can explain later. But yeah, I think that's the best explanation I can give in this context.
I think that's a great explanation. Logiq, I want you to piggyback off of that, but I have a follow-up question for you. Can you just brief overview, right? Like Elegant did. The difference between a monopoly and an oligopoly.
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably butcher the textbook definition of it, but essentially, a monopoly is theoretically one vendor owning a space. An oligopoly is a very limited number of vendors occupying a space. The thumb rule that I found talks about 60% of a market being owned by six or fewer competitors. Um, and so, and at times we've talked about the car industry kind of being an oligopoly. There is nothing inherently illegal about an oligopoly, and even to a certain extent, where Elegant was talking, I think part of the confusion in the conversation, especially on Twitter, our favorite space, is people talk about a monopoly, and one thing I would say, and I mean, Elegant, if you disagree, please tell me. At least in the U.S., we have antitrust and anti-competition laws. Those don't necessarily wait until a monopoly is established to be triggered, right? A lot of them are are done and get acted upon to prevent a situation like that from ever occurring. They're points of intervention to swerve the train before it hits that point. By the same token, um, one of the things that I insist upon, right, in this country, and it's even, I would say, kind of a political push of mine, companies should not be punished for being good, right? Just because you are competitive and you do well doesn't mean that you're a monopoly. A lot of times we try and label Google as a monopoly, but just because Google came up with what is arguably the best search engine, right? That one doesn't make them a monopoly. And when we get into talking about how different judicial systems act upon that, right? It's dangerous territory when again we get into the thou shalt be punished because thou like built a better thing than all the other competitors.
I'm glad you brought that up because I knew at some point antitrust would come up. I want to point out that Amazon owns right at 50 or right under 50% of US e-commerce market space, which is gigantic. But the Federal Trade Commission, which is the organization here in the States that helps regulate, right, these antitrust laws, has not deemed them, that's not enough for them to be a monopoly. I don't know what they would do to prevent that. But the reason I think it's good we brought that up is I want to say around 120 countries globally have antitrust laws. When we look at console gaming, right, the big three, we've got Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft. When we look at those pieces of hardware and the software that accompany them, I want to say I think somewhere around 65 or 70% of the distribution, the sales, and the accessibility as far as creation is two countries, Japan and the United States. Both of them have antitrust laws. Elegant will probably know more, but I think pretty much all of the EU has antitrust laws. So you can't just go in as Microsoft and say, I have money, I'm going to buy this and do whatever I want everywhere. It's not how the checks and balances that these 120 countries are using, they're not quite, that's not quite how they let it work. So Elegant, I kind of want to rope around to you. What do you want to say on the antitrust laws and on the dynamic that we may or may not see in this Microsoft acquisition?
Yeah, I think Logic brought up a great point. I think that there are antitrust laws in place, but they are being triggered way too late in a lot of occasions. So I think Amazon could be an argument for these things not really working properly. You could make that argument. I'm not saying you would be right, but it's the example on the top of my head. But I'm sorry. What was the question? The antitrust. What will happen here? Yeah, I think that what will happen is that this will pass with flying colors. Basically, I'm pretty convinced that, which is why Phil Spencer tweeted that Call of Duty. It's their desire to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation, because I think it wouldn't pass without them having to make some commitments, and that could be one of those commitments that they had to sign, where they go, yeah, these are the biggest franchises out there in the gaming space, and we're not going to take them off any platforms, not even new releases. So I don't think there will be anything that triggers any warning systems here, especially because they won't, with these acquisitions, they won't be the number one biggest gaming company, and the gaming space is so big. Like, it's not just console and PC gaming, and the big behemoth is the mobile space. And sure, they're entering the mobile space now with King being part of this, and that's probably a big reason for why they did this acquisition. But yeah, I don't see any antitrust laws that will be triggered here where they say, hold your horses, we cannot allow this. I do want to point out, though, that the timing of this is very brave, because especially in the EU, there are a big pushback against tech companies, especially those that really want your data. Like, your data is their currency, and Microsoft is definitely one of them. So I was shocked when I saw them doing this at this point, because that takes some balls, to be completely honest. Like, that was the thing that shocked me the most, I think.
Yeah, I'm glad that you pointed that out, because one of the questions that I wanted to ask, so I'll go ahead and ask you this, Logiq. Do you think, as part of the regulatory acts that they're going to go through, that's going to vary by country, do you think that keeping a lot of these titles, or all of them, or some of them, multi-plat is going to be part of this deal being allowed to be finalized?
I think it's going to be interesting to watch it unfold. So a few of the things that I had in mind is right as Elegant said, and as you have said, right. So each of these things, I don't think it has to be done in every single country. I think it has to do, and Elegant can again correct me if I think it has to do with the valuation of exactly what components of the deal are incorporated within given countries, right? But simplify it to say it's got to meet Trade Commission equivalent approval in more than just the United States, right, for it to go through.
Yep.
I agree with Elegant, right, that there's a good chance that there's going to be some jockeying back and forth, and there's potentially going to be some divestitures of various corporate components of Activision and or Microsoft, right, in order to help the deal go through. It's always a matter of barter. It's always a matter of, you guys can make the deal, but you have to sell off X, right? And often when these things go down, we see, new companies that are spawned out of this, or pieces that go off to be part of another company. Whether or not it means things have to stay multi-plat, I'm not absolutely certain on that topic, because I think part of the dialogue and part of the PR'd statements that are going around might be caught up in the whatever deals Activision made with Sony about Call of Duty. So if we think back in history, Call of Duty used to always show up on the Xbox stage first, because they had a marketing deal, and then that shifted and they signed the next marketing deal in sequence with Sony, and they started showing up on their stage first. They started getting exclusive content. They started getting timed exclusive content, right? There were things that would go with an iteration of Call of Duty and be on PlayStation for a year before it would come to Xbox. If the antitrust cover had been pulled off of that, I might have asked questions like, right, how is that okay? Because by the time it gets on Xbox, you're moving on and selling the next version of Call of Duty. So I don't really know, right? So there's things like that. So I don't know, and I want to say that I think the way the battle rhythm on this went is they're 5-year deals. I think the last re-up to the 5-year deal, I think, went along with Black Ops Cold War. And so we're on iteration 2 of a 5-year deal. We'll have 3 more years to go. I don't know with absolute certainty that part of what's behind Phil's statements aren't, we are going to honor currently signed deals, which, by the way, are only for the next 3 years. And then after that, I'm going to do whatever the hell it is I want to do. Right? That could possibly happen. The other hedge against whether or not they have to keep those things multi-plat, and I believe that this has part of the dynamic of why it might be okay and why they were so emboldened to go forward with the deal, is Tencent. Tencent has also been going around gobbling up developers and other publishers, sometimes just taking a huge stake, sometimes taking them over wholesale. They have a dialogue that attributes to them being independent from the Chinese Communist Party. There's not everyone who takes them at their word for that. China is not a most favored nation in most Western countries. Microsoft has a huge footprint in government services, not only within the United States, but also overseas. I struggle to believe that part of the dialogue wasn't, right, as they shop this around, because absolutely certainly they walked this on Capitol Hill before they made the announcement. And they walked it other places with lobbyists before they made the announcement. I'm not sure that part of the dialogue that went along with that is, hey, look, guys, if you don't let us do this, Tencent is going to keep gobbling up companies. They're not going to stop. Their appetite's going to keep getting bigger. And eventually they're going to do something like buy Activision. Now, do you want Tencent to own something like that? Or do you want a US company who has a firm foothold in government services in the Western world to be the holder of that type of chalice? Because eventually it's going to happen. And so the notion that they have to keep some of these things multi-plat may not necessarily be the case if part of the hedge is, right, that they need to strengthen, right, with a Western-founded company, a bulwark against Tencent.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because the question that I'm going to ask, I don't actually know the answer to. I'm going to intentionally be vague so that I don't say too much, just to protect some of the clients that I have that I do work for. But for close to 15 years, I have been doing export, import liaison work and spend a lot of time with businesses in Australasia. So I have spent many years working with businesses in China, and culturally it's very different, not just because they have a different culture, but their legal system is entirely different. There is no intellectual property that you can protect. They can rip off your trademark, and you can go over there and spend so much money on lawyers and show them everything and have a great conversation with them. And it's not quite, it's not going to go the way that it's going to go in a place like Japan, right? If you take a trademark lawyer over there. So, and I don't know the answer to this, so I don't know if either of you do. What would happen theoretically if a company like Tencent, because when you operate, right, under mainland China, it's not even that drastically different in People's Republic of Taiwan or Macau either. You don't have to operate on the same trademark laws or business practices. You can sign a legally binding contract with as many other companies outside of China as you want. The Chinese government won't make you honor any of that. That's not me trying to shit talk China. That's how their business climate is. What would happen if a company like Tencent were to acquire Western companies like Activision or Blizzard? Does anybody know like how that would change on the antitrust law area?
I think we're already seeing that, because we know that Tencent, and I don't know if NetEase still has that, but we know that Tencent have a lot of fingers in the different cookie jars, so to speak. I think they own part of Ubisoft. I think they own parts of, or they did at least, or will probably exit this deal with a hefty amount of money when Microsoft buys Activision Blizzard. So they do have a stake in, I think they have a stake in Platinum Games as well. Like they have ownership, not a majority stake, but they do have ownership in a lot of different publishers, and even those that claims to be independent development studios. So yeah, I don't think that would change anything, and I don't necessarily think that's why Microsoft bought them. I think the fact that there were rumors of Facebook perhaps eyeing them, and there were rumors of a merger with EA, and we know that we have companies like Amazon and Apple and Google, and yeah, Facebook as well, with their push towards the metaverse. They want into the gaming space. I don't for a second believe that Microsoft looked at PlayStation and said, what about PlayStation? We need to buy Activision Blizzard. This was definitely to basically gatekeep their own space in the gaming industry, and not let those parties like Apple and Google and etc. into the space, and dropping $70 billion, which is an absolute incredible amount of money, just dropping that and showing like that's a flex. You show those other companies that if you're going to enter, it's going to cost you, and we're already here. We have the knowledge that you don't, and if you even try, we're going to probably keep pushing these deals. So yeah, I think the fact that this came around was one that Activision Blizzard was looking for a buyer, just like Bethesda was or ZeniMax, and Microsoft did. They did the math and they saw that if they happens to go to Facebook or to Amazon, then the gaming space could be a very different arena for them to compete in, and they definitely don't want that. And yeah, Tencent was that it was rumored that they were looking at ZeniMax or Bethesda. So in that case, I definitely believe that was a part of it. But in this case, I'm 100% positive that this was absolutely to flex on and even block those other possible competitors that want to enter this space.
I think, especially with rumors that Netflix is going into streaming games, we know that Facebook has been making a push for gaming, and now they have gaming streaming, and with Oculus and things like that. Microsoft is all in on Game Pass, in my opinion. So I think the more things, the more chunky AAA mainstream titles that are kept from Game. I think that this is a strategic maneuver that will help you with recurring revenue. I think they can get to their targeted numbers if they do this on Game Pass. And if other companies had bought them, that would have changed what Game Pass looks like for them and what it looks like for their margins. So let's talk about that a little bit, because that's always going to be a debate, right? What's better, buying full price game? I mean, most everything, correct me if I'm wrong, most content and entertainment now is popular in the streaming space. Movies, music. I mean, I know plenty of people still buy albums and DVDs and stuff, but is it safe to say that the majority of people are streaming content more?
Oh yeah, 100%. I think
Okay.
it's very uncommon for people to go out and buy a CD with music today. Most people will consume it through Spotify, or they will watch their TV series and movies through Netflix. So yeah, definitely, it's the entertainment space is dominated by subscription services today, especially in the Western world.
And I didn't bother to actually research that before, so that was just me making an assumption that I think this is what's happening. Gaming hasn't gotten to that point yet, but you see a lot of conversations that have happened prior to this acquisition, or that happened last acquisition on Twitter, where people are talking about the finances. I know in the software world for many years now, software has been making recurring revenue is king. Anytime businesses come in and want that help to improve their look at Chewy.com. Okay, that's where I buy all my pet stuff. Every single time you buy something, every single time they're going to offer you a permanent 5% discount to get everything on auto renew. And the push is for recurring income. Like the sweet spot is recurring income. Like even dropping your margin a little bit to guarantee that people will come back and spend. QuickBooks. I can buy one copy of QuickBooks for $350 on my MacBook Pro and use the shit out of that thing till it doesn't work anymore for 5, 6, 7 years. But every time I open up QuickBooks, Intuit is like, are you sure you don't want to upgrade and get the online stuff that runs through the cloud and gives you all these extra benefits for only $79.99 a month? Because recurring revenue, in my opinion, has kind of been king there. What Logiq, do you have thoughts on that strategy? Do you think that this is a Game Pass move? Do you what do you think about all of the blabber that I'm just going on right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a key part of it. I don't know that it's the be all end all, but if I go back to kind of 2020, I think it was that Microsoft kind of talked about its renewed strategy, right, with regards to gaming, and what they talked about is that the gaming population, right, does not currently include another 2 billion gamers on the planet, right? The console and PC gaming population, right, doesn't include 2 billion people who they have a need or a desire to reach, right? Instead of continuing to fight Sony over customers that are already in the market, right? The search is for the customers that aren't. And so one of their strategies was to remove the impediment, the barrier to entry from those consumers coming in the market of the need to invest in a $500 console in order to participate. And so Xbox Cloud Gaming is a way to reach those additional 2 billion customers who sit in markets where there is more robust cell phone connectivity than we even have here in the United States, right? Because it's a lot more uniform, it's a lot more standardized, and there's greater uptake because they have not dug telephone lines all over the country like we have. And so it's much easier and it's much more prevalent for them to go put over the air stuff in place. And that infrastructure is better in a lot of cases. Um, and so what do you do to continue to encourage that market segment to get in? You stuff more content into Game Pass and you put content in there that previously they would have had to pay full price for. I think another part of this move is kind of like Elegant mentioned, right? The gaming industry is somewhere around upwards of 175, 180 billion dollars. A little less than half of that comes from console and PC gaming, and $90 billion of it or so comes from mobile gaming. It's not my own idea, but one of the conversations I was engaged in a spaces, and I can't remember her name, so I apologize. Young lady brought up the fact that if you look at the history of consoles, and I talked about this a few weeks ago, they are inherently characterized by increasing complexity, most so reflected in the control schemes that have gone along with each console generation. Each console generation has brought more buttons, more interface services, analog controls over simply digital, until we're at the point now where there's a bajillion buttons on your controller, right? And it does all sorts of stuff. And then we have controllers that have shifts that double and triple the functionality of the various buttons. That is a normative for us in the Western world. It is not necessarily a normative for people in those countries. And so even though I think Microsoft has taken a good move by virtualizing the Xbox controller, right, to where now it's mirrored and reflected in its implementation on a touch interface, and they've even gone the extra mile with some games where they have reimagined a purely touch interface for some of their games. But what this move allows them to do is it allows them to take that big, honky, hunky mobile division and capitalize on it being part of Microsoft by taking that content and putting it in Game Pass and creating an environment where now those people who are hungry for the mobile game paradigm can now access that content via subscription. And they might sweeten the pot by making it sort of like an Apple arcade kind of thing, um, and removing like microtransactions and those types of things from them, just like Apple does, and allowing you to play those games without that kind of obtrusive, naggy kind of interface. I do want to mention that when I said honky, I did not mean that in the racial term. I meant that in terms of kind of like chonky, like big. Right?
Oh, that's what I thought you meant. I forgot that honky
Thanks.
could be. I think you said like honky and hunky and chonky.
Right.
Like, yeah, that's how I feel about some of the control. Like, it's so chonky, and I like it. Elegant.
Could I just piggyback off that real quick, because I
Yes,
think
please
that
do.
one term that they were throwing around a lot was the metaverse, and I think that a big part of them spending this amount of money is that they will get the opportunity to get you on a screen when you're not in front of your PC or your console. I think that they're gonna target us, who are more like quote unquote premium gamers, who want the 4K experience or the 200 FPS experience on PC or whatever whatever our daily gaming looks like. And they want us to be on a screen more. So if they could pair that that experience, so that when you're not on your console or your PC, you will be on mobile, and they will find ways to push us there. I'm not there currently. I don't like mobile games. I have maybe one exception, which is Sky, by the developers that made Journey. That game is phenomenal, and I'm mostly not on mobile games because I feel like the control scheme is really bad. And yeah, so my guess is that they will, and this is why they're talking about the metaverse. They want to have us in this universe of their gaming space where they get our data 24/7, because we're always connected and gaming in some way. So I'm very positive that this is a big part of this, because they could make us even more hooked, so to speak, and on different devices than we are right now.
I'm glad you brought that up because I wasn't even thinking about this. I actually was going to ask you to piggyback, and you just said something that made me think of something, and I'm going to make sure I don't go down a whole separate rabbit hole here. But we're users. I know some people don't like the term users. We're users. I mean, it's what we're called. The goal is to make us addicted, and so many of us are addicted as fuck to social media. We're addicted to entertainment, to binging TV shows, to technology. All of that turns into money in the marketing world. Like any of us can literally go and buy from these big marketing companies documents, that printouts that will show you where people's eyes look. Like when making content for web pages, there's a certain design that we want the paragraphs to look like because it's what's most common. Their data is being tracked. What you do, what you click on, how your eyes look at the screen, what you type and how often you type, just to be realistic, that stuff is being tracked. That's how data is collected. That's how marketing works. So, Elegant, I think you have a fantastic point, keeping us addicted, using the medium that we like to keep us addicted to this type of technology promotes marketing revenue because it promotes collecting data, right? And that can ultimately be sold. Is that
And those things have been dabbled with already. I think it was Mass Effect 3 where they had an app where you could log in and you could do certain tasks on the app. I think it was Mass Effect 3. I didn't use that, so correct me if I'm wrong, but it could be Andromeda as well. Yeah, so these things has been dabbled with, but they haven't fully been realized. And with the tech being as far gone as it is right now, it is in a different space right now than it was back then. There is so much opportunity here. So our screen time is their currency. Our data is their currency. So if they could create this, let's call it metaverse, where we are constantly online playing games in one way or another, that's their wet dream, basically, because they could monetize that to infinity. So that's the ROI that they want from this.
I love that phrase, by the way, that our screen time is their currency. That's brilliant. So then let's switch gears just a little bit then, sort of, kind of, and talk about stonks, because what we've seen a whole bunch on Twitter. So, Elegant, I'm going to go back to you on this one. We've seen some very polarizing, very dynamic headlines that Sony has faced irreparable damage in the stock market. I don't even remember how many billions, I don't know. I really didn't pay attention to it. How worried do you think that people need to be? How much of that is over exaggerated? What do you think is happening and is at play here?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. There's just so much money into the tech space right now. And when this was, let's just look at this case. And this was clearly an overreaction from investors who didn't really know what this thing means. And they will definitely recoup this. Like they will bounce back. There is no doubt about that, because Sony is not only PlayStation, they have their TVs, and they are the first company who's pushing out a QD OLED. and they have so much going for them. So yeah, this was definitely an overreaction, and this happens very often in the tech space, in the stock market. I feel like I did, as a, let's call it, social experiment, try to invest in the gaming space, just to see how the market acts. And yeah, it's very, very reactive. So I'm not surprised at all that this happened, and I'm very positive that they will bounce back. So those who are smart about this, they will probably put their money into Sony right now, because they will, once Horizon is out and Gran Turismo 7 and God of War, and yeah, those numbers will turn. Yes, it was a bigger hit than I thought it would be, but I'm still not surprised given how reactive the market is at this day and age, especially in tech, because there are a lot of money in there who doesn't really know what to do there and how things work. So yeah, I think that if you're an investor, or if you're a gamer and your investment in Sony is buying a PlayStation and their games, there is nothing that you should fear about this. You should not be worried at all. There's no reason to. I think if the hit would have been even bigger, like they dropped 25%, that would have been a different story, and it would have taken them some time to bounce back. But I don't think this is something that will even make a dent long term. That's my prognosis.
I'm kind of in the same boat with you on that. And since I love giving Daddy Jim money, I might have to buy me some Sony stocks while the price dropped on that a bit. Logiq, if you could piggyback off that, and let me ask you, how much does this acquisition change investor value when it comes to Microsoft? How much does this look more enticing for investors? Could part of the acquisition had to do with return of investment in bringing more people in to buy in and invest in? What are your thoughts?
That's a tougher one. I don't know that it makes a huge hill of beans to somebody who already owns Microsoft stock. The revenue of Activision last year, I think, was around $8 billion. The revenue of Microsoft, the revenue of Activision, then the gaming revenue of Microsoft, I think was around $15 billion. The net of putting the two of them together, tips them over the edge to being ahead then of, I'm going to go back to them again, Tencent, which I think is around was around $19 to $22 billion. It gives them, more significant presence in the gaming market in general. But I don't know that investors readily correlate how the acquisition plays into or matters in the context of Microsoft's real primary strategy, which is cloud and services. Or that they get and understand what the expansion of Game Pass as a service does for their bottom line. I think they get it enough to not rail against it, but I don't know that they're, running around buying yachts because Microsoft bought Activision.
Right. This is going to be the strangest thing that anybody's ever heard on this podcast, but my dog peed on the floor and I have a cat playing in it. So this is the first time ever that if you're listening to this, you can't see. Well, we can't technically see if Elegant's laughing or not, but this is not Logiq's first time in dealing with my animal disasters. I am going to quickly just sneak over there and clean that up, and I'm going to let Logiq and Elegant kind of take over hosting in some direction for a bit, and then I'm going to jump back in and ask some other questions that I want to ask. So Logiq, just keep going, and you and Elegant just keep taking this conversation while I mute my mic and go deal with a pissy situation.
Yeah, no problem at all. So Elegant, one of the things that I wanted to go back to was your comment about Sony and the theoretical loss of $20 billion of stock value in the wake of this deal. So of course, I think one of the key financial realities that not everyone gets, quite honestly, I'm I have a slight struggle, with correlating this all the time myself. But corporations don't really get rich or run a lot of their financial operations off of stock, right? It's a thing that has a different kind of effect that's not directly attributable to operating margin or cash flow or yada yada yada.
Exactly. Yeah.
I at a high level, I see your perspective and understand it that this isn't a big knock on Sony and they'll recover. One of the questions that I wanted to ask though is, so in the past few years, since the PlayStation Network outage of 2011, and shortly thereafter when Sony restructured and they took the PlayStation division and combined it with their network division and all of their other gaming operations, and combined them all under the PlayStation division and made that the one gaming division to rule them all. Sony's other businesses that you mentioned, at that time were not doing well. Televisions were not doing well. Computers were not doing well. They sold off the laptop business in Vio to get rid of it and divest of it because it was hurting them so bad. Cell phones don't really do well. Their best thing is the fact that Sony camera lenses are in 99% of all smartphones, right? But the cell phones themselves don't particularly sell well. What's your take on? Yes, they'll recover. This isn't that big of a deal. However, it is a knock on what for them is the best performing, most profitable division that really, to a certain extent, while the other business divisions are on their way back, the reality is like they've been surviving on PlayStation for the last few years.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that earlier this week, and I was just playing around with the idea that what if, Xbox and Microsoft gaming in this case becomes so big that Sony feels that they have to sort of they have to basically get that power back somehow. And I was playing with the idea that they could, go and merge somewhere. And let's say that because they have a relationship with Marvel, let's say that they decide to merge with Disney. And we were talking earlier about these great entities that wants to enter the gaming space. I think that Disney would absolutely love to enter the gaming space. And since they already have a working relationship with Sony and they have a working relationship with Square Enix, Square Enix and Sony are well known to work together. So long term, I could see that being something that could happen. But I don't think that this is, even if PlayStation is sort of carrying Sony, I don't think it's. Look, I think there was some uncomfortable discussions. That's all I'm going to say. But I think that they ended up at, there's no need to freak out because they have a strategy that has been put in place recently with acquiring smaller studios that they know very well and that makes very high quality games. And they are on a path where they want to be, they're talking about the excellence in gaming and marketing be damned. They kind of, they've been successful in that stride. So I don't think that they have, they probably freaked out for, a day or two. And then they sort of landed on, we have this strategy in place and people are buying our gaming devices because we make excellent games. And if they continue to do that, they will bounce back in no time. And look, they don't have to spend 70 billion to catch up. They could easily, not, quote unquote easily, actually beef up their studio count by keep doing what they're doing. They could keep investing in smaller studios, and there's a lot of talent there, especially Haven with Jade Redmond that they already invested in. They don't own that studio, but they invested in the project, and they could keep doing this, and they would sort of one-to-one be able to match the output of games from Xbox. But I don't think that's the goal of either Sony or PlayStation. I think the goal is to, as they say, be at the top they are the excellence of gaming, and they want to. I don't think that owning 30 for studio something, like, you're not gonna have all of those games are not going to be hits. Let's just say that. And it will be much more manageable growing the way they are growing. And yeah, they are a Japanese based company, or at least they were, until Jim Ryan sort of started to positioning them being more global and being more US and UK based. But I can't see that this is something that have caused any sort of long-term panic, and them running around looking at what should we acquire next. I can't see that. So even if the PlayStation is the part of Sony that's carrying the company, I don't think they are that scared about this at all. I think they've had very good calls with Microsoft about this already, so they know what the deal is and everything. So yeah, I don't think it's going to hurt them in any way. And I could even, I just looked it up and I saw that the Microsoft share price has also been lowered. We're not talking like 12%, but yeah, we know that there are investors at Microsoft that has been questioning the gaming push. So it's interesting to just see this pan out. And I think the headlines has been very exaggerated and also very reactive to something that, sure, it's worth writing about, but it's not something that will have a long-term negative effect on either Sony or Microsoft.
I think you guys pretty much asked the question I was planning to ask, is does Sony have to respond? It sounds like Logiq just basically like shared my brain, and it sounds like that's exactly the next thing I thought made sense to talk about anyway. Can we just talk about Disney and games for a minute? I might be wrong, but I could have sworn there were two. They may not have been PS3 exclusives, but I thought they may have been games that were made by Disney, or at least published by Disney. Split Second and Pure. Were those Disney games?
So I'll probably butcher the history on this as well. So Disney used to have a gaming division that, if I'm not mistaken, they have since shuttered. They have stepped back into that space by reopening LucasArts, the gaming wing division of LucasArts, as an IP controller, so that they have an executive agency that can farm the IPs out to EA and other places, but they're the ones who hold the iron reins on continuity and telling people what they can and can't do with their properties. I think it was a super huge theory and projection, because that's one of the things to me that Elegant offered. That's one of the things to me that makes probably the most sense of the various, like, often radically crazy ideas and hot takes that I've heard. Elegant's projection is actually a more thoughtful, intellectual piece, because the synergy that would be gained, and kind of some of the rumblings that we've already seen that Disney has at least thought of something like that, is that obviously Sony Studios is a thorn in Disney and Marvel's side with their ownership of Spider-Man. And they got so tired of the back and forth with Fox that they just finally said, fine, we will just buy you. And that will give us the X-Men back and the Fantastic Four. And we'll be done with it. And you guys will just do what we tell you to do. That could be a route that Disney would take, because it would give them Spider-Man back, and that fight would be over. And if there's a synergy that would come from some type of relationship with the PlayStation division, either in a merger or whatever, or just buying them all along the way, that would definitely bolster Disney's strategies in multiple vectors, right, and not solely in gaming. And it would get them back in the gaming market. So yeah, that's a very interesting theory.
I remember, I'm pretty sure those were Disney games, and I very much enjoyed both of them. I don't know if either of you have played them, but they were both really damned good games. I would be happy if they produced games like that, of that quality again. But I want everything to be next gen. Like Elegant said earlier, I'm that 4K whore. I know I play on console, okay? I know I may not make sense, all right? But that's my jam. Yeah, does Sony have to respond? I think that's what Elegant was talking about when he was saying they probably were only worried for a day or two and just keep on doing what they're doing. That's my take on it too. They both have very different strategies. I think Game Pass strategy, and they're investing a shitload of money. Like all the servers and stuff. I mean, they're obviously all in. I think they're going to need to get to at least 50 million subs to start turning a profit. I think their strategy is just based on getting as much quantity as we can, get Game Pass. I don't think Sony has to do anything from this point. I mean, they're producing good quality games, and right now people are happy to buy them at full price. They're going to start selling more titles when they become available on PC, which is a lot of extra money for them. So, I mean, we could, who knows what we'll see with Sony could decide to get into streaming. You might see Game Pass on Sony and Nintendo one day. I mean, anything is possible if you think about it. But do I think that Sony is having a knee-jerk reaction the same way that a lot of social media users are? No, not at all. I don't think they're.
I think what's really interesting is that it feels like all the console manufacturers are on the path that they should be on, or the path that they could be on. You know, Microsoft or Xbox had to sort of wrestle themselves back into the space because they dropped the ball so massively like they did last gen. So they had to basically disrupt the gaming market with Game Pass and just make everything around that. And Sony is on a path where they are producing incredible games. And we have Nintendo, who obviously also are making great games off their legacy IPs. And they sort of have a stranglehold on the handheld market, even if it's maybe more of a hybrid market. So it's very interesting to see, and I think people forget that they are all on the path that they should be on and the path that they could be on right now, unless they want to make something drastic. And you cannot say that these companies don't have they have a huge confidence. And I believe that PlayStation are 100% in on what they're doing. They're even trying to broaden their sort of genre of games, and Nintendo is gonna, they're going to be over there at the side and playing and doing whatever the heck they want, and we're gonna be joining them, and we just gotta love what they're doing over there, even if they hate us and absolutely, they don't want to give us any sort of good online features or anything, but we will hug them and we will love them anyway. So I think it's interesting to see that, to follow this conversation where people totally forget that they're all on a path that is very positive for these companies. So if you're an Xbox fan, you should be excited. If you're a PlayStation fan, you should be excited. If you're a Nintendo fan, you should also be excited. So it's very interesting to see this sort of panic, or I don't know what to call it. It's a chaotic situation of emotions, I guess. But if you just take a step back, you clearly see that these companies have a strategy, that it's in place. They are in a good place right now, and they are on a path where they all have a very noticeable and a great place in gaming. And we should also be very happy that, $70 billion is being spent in the gaming space. If you're a gamer, you should probably be excited about that.
I mean, I love gaming, but I also have a luxury that not everyone gets to have, where I have all the consoles and the systems. So I try to be mindful of, does someone who, if you live in a different country and you can't access it easily, how much does that change for you? So I'm always concerned about that. As a gamer who has empathy and wants to see other people enjoy what I enjoy, but this is really about the business side. So if I put, that emotion aside and I don't look at this in a gaming perspective, it's simply business. And if you don't get it, you don't get it. I mean, that's the way business is, right? It's profit first. Obviously, they're all doing what they think they need to do financially for their business. I think you said it wonderful, Elegant. I don't think I can add much of anything on top of that. I think you might have just shut this whole shit down, man. Like I think case is closed, man. Logic, do you have anything that you kind of want to piggyback off on what he was talking about how the big three, right, the trifecta, everybody's kind of got their niche and their own strategy, and it's working for them, and they seem to be all in that independent direction that they're going in.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's angles to it, right? Is what I think. Elegant brought up something very pertinent, which I think is that Nintendo has found ways and is on a path that is disruptive, right? That the other gaming companies aren't doing. Microsoft has come up with a path that is disruptive. That is something the other two gaming companies aren't doing. Where I do have a slight bit of concern as we extrapolate further and further out into the future is that the PlayStation strategy, as we call it, is doubling down on what has always worked for us before. And when you look at technology companies and companies that are heavily coupled to the types of endemic problems that happen in things like the innovator's dilemma, you begin a set of questions, right? That makes you ask, how long is that going to be good for? Gamers are happy about it now, right? Is there a tip over point where that becomes a problem? There are elements to that even all gamers aren't entirely happy about, like your inability to get back to PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 games right now, unless you actually own legacy versions of those consoles or PlayStation 3 games. You mentioned being a multi-platform gamer and having access to all the things, and something I commented on a show a couple of weeks ago. It's a thing. It's a first world problem, absolutely, but it is a thing when I go, there's a game I want to get to on PC, I can get to it. There's a game I want to get to on Xbox, I can get to it. There's a game I want to get to on Switch, I can get to it. There's a game I want to get to on PlayStation. Oh, there's no way to play that thing, right? So there's a point where there's not a parity, right, within a gamer's ecosystem if they are multi-plat. So there are tattered edges, right, of the veil, which are not entirely pristine, which potentially create opportunities for the other gaming companies, which are things which, in this era of uncertainty, the one thing I will say about the Microsoft acquisition, I completely agree, like the people panicking and freaking out and flipping out and like dropping all the hot takes and the pie faces on YouTube are way overblown. However, what I will say is over the next 2 years, new gamers coming into the community are faced with a set of uncertainties where if they don't already have an ascribed brand loyalty, they're making a choice, right? And most new gamers, when they first come into the ecosystem, don't have the luxury of being able to get all the platforms. They have to pick one. And so the dynamics of that bet that you place are different now, right? When you say, I'm going to the store, I'm a kid who's on a worker's permit, I've got my first job, I'm going to drop 500 ducats on a console. Do I go Sony first party exclusives and more? I'm going to say it this way deliberately to drive a conversation, right? And I'm going to double down on my expectations that are more Uncharted, more The Last of Us, more Gran Turismo, more of these things, right? Because Sony has said that they want to double down on the studios doing what they already do well and not entertain a lot of notions of fanning out and doing new things. Or do I go with this now behemoth of a corporation which owns a ton of IPs, and we still are kind of poised with a degree of uncertainty about knowing whether or not and how much of those things are going to go exclusive? Because what I will say is, yeah, Phil said he's going to keep Call of Duty multi-plat, but I absolutely guarantee you there are things in that Activision Blizzard portfolio that are going to be declared exclusives that have best synergies when they are deployed on just Xbox and PC, and essentially kind of take them away from PlayStation. So I think there are some black holes right in that entire schema that leave some questions.
That's my only concern, and I mean it's completely. I mean, we can have theories as to what's going to happen, but we don't really know But that's been my biggest concern. Again, the gamer in me, my biggest concern is that somebody might have to make a choice, which means they're going to miss out. Like, do you want to not play the Outer Worlds 2 and like Starfield and Halo, or do you want to not play like Horizon Forbidden West and God? It's and some of those games coming on PC. I know it does change the dynamic, but if I take if I take that away and go just as business perspective, I mean, this acquisition was huge and it's big and it helps them double down on Game Pass. And from a business perspective, it also keeps it out of the hands. Like Elegant said, Tencent isn't going to get it. Amazon, fuck Amazon. Thank God Amazon isn't going to get it. Cause like if they buy a studio I love, I'm going to cry because it's like, can I successfully still boycott them? Like if they own something that I really love and want to enjoy, you know?
And even one of the things with Call of Duty, right? I would still like wait until the ink is dry, because part of what could be going on, even though, and I love Uncle Phil, right? I believe in a lot of what he says, but I know from the Bethesda thing that like everything that they say is not inherently at face value, and you need to be on standby for the pivot. What could be coming down the pike is that, yeah, Call of Duty is going to say multiplat, but you could be faced with the choice of, yes, it's going to be multiplat, but just like MLB The Show, that stuff's going to be, Call of Duty is going to be in Game Pass, and certain people in certain ecosystems are going to have the ability to access it by paying $10 or $15 a month, which, let's face it, what we've learned from the way smartphones are sold, people just feel, is it that painful, right? And so they're okay doing it, at least in the Western world. Or you can play it on the PlayStation platform and you can pay $70 for it, right? And every single season pass, blah, 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 blah. You know, yes, you still have to buy the season passes on Xbox, but you get them at a discount because as a Game Pass subscriber, you get 5, 10, 15, 20% off or whatever it is. So those could still be competitive choices that they force out into the marketplace and make consumers have, where there's an apparency, where there's a feeling like you're getting a better deal by going one way or the other. So I think the big thing for me, at least, that's still in the future, and just kind of the way the gaming companies are behaving now, the key thing that I'm left with as a question is, again, I won't say Sony's in the majority. They're obviously doing well. I understand that people would push back on any notion of questioning their strategy. The big question that I'm left with, again, as somebody who spends a ton of time looking at, studying, researching technology business leaders, right, and one myself in my own space, when I look at the Sony corporate culture and ask and try and dig out is that a corporate culture that has the ability to change when they are going to be faced with the need to do so? Or are they like a Xerox, which has, and a General Electric to a certain extent, which has an entrenched, right, static culture, which refuses to believe in change, right, to a certain extent, like the Ballmer Microsoft, and won't? That is the big threat. And it's very much a matter of like them becoming their own worst enemy, because they aren't able to detect and pick up on when it is time to pivot and change and mix up the formula.
I feel that way a little more about Nintendo. I feel like this whole thing's going down, and like in Japan, Nintendo's like, those peasants, and they're like cracking open whatever beer they drink in Japan, and they're like, we're fucking Nintendo. Because like we all love Nintendo. Like people buy the shit out of Nintendo, man.
Yeah,
Like,
and to be fair, they could be enjoying that beer with a good conscience, just because they're gonna drop Mario Kart 9, and yes, we're gonna buy it, and it doesn't matter if the multiplayer doesn't work or whatever. Just we're just gonna lap up whatever they throw at us, and I mean, we can joke about it, but most of it is very good. Like they make excellent games, and a lot of systems and mechanics and animations are actually in other games are inspired by Nintendo games, because I know that game developers absolutely, just as us, love playing Nintendo games. But I think before we end, I think one thing that I want to touch upon is the fact that we have been talking about why this deal happened a little bit, but I think one thing that we haven't talked about is the fact that they dropped the number 25 million Game Pass subscribers, and like that's nothing in terms of if you compare it to other subscription services. Those 25 million that's a problem, and they need to get up to like 100+ million if this is going to be a sustainable service, just Game Pass.
Is that the number you think? Because I was estimating they were going to need at least 50. Do you think that it
Yeah,
needs to be at least 100?
absolutely, especially when the development cycle of these games are so long. I think that 100+ million is definitely what they're aiming for as sort of the bottom.
Can I ask you
And
a quick question then? Okay, keep that
yeah,
number 100 million in your head, because of course I also didn't account for. I got to 50 after ZeniMax Bethesda, so I didn't really think if
yeah,
they took games like Call of Duty that have yearly releases and they changed that and said we're not going to develop them every year, does that change the number? So what I'm basically asking you is, will they make changes within what these companies are doing so that they can better get to that number, or will they incorporate more from the mobile market, you think? Like what does it look like for them? Is it more likely for them to get to the 100 million, or more likely they'll make adjustments so they don't have to get to 100 million?
no, they're definitely aiming for that 100+ million, and I don't think that they're gonna slow down on the Call of Duty releases. They're probably gonna just throw them out between different studios because they will have a great portfolio of studios, and there are probably some of them who really want to make a Call of Duty game and could make a Call of Duty game. I think the Coalition could make an excellent Call of Duty game if they wanted to. So yeah, I don't see them changing that at all, because part of this strategy is to sort of brute forcing people onto Game Pass, and they have a marketing issue because they aren't as big in the EU, for example, or in Asia. So they have an uphill battle to fight. So I think a lot of this money goes into marketing, and the best marketing is to slap an Xbox logo on the most popular gaming franchises. So if you can just smack it onto Overwatch and to Call of Duty, that's fantastic marketing. You cannot get better marketing in the gaming space. So I think a lot of the money that they spent is something that they calculated would go into ads, and now they don't have to do that. They can just push it out in Overwatch 2 or whatever. So this is definitely a strategy to raise that subscriber count, because those 25 million, yes, it has been growing and that's a good thing for them, but it's way too low. Like it's way too low. And you can make that math yourself. And if you start adding up all the studios that they have, and let's say that they're all making AAA games, like they are so, it's way, they're losing a ton of money on that service.
Plus they're building out all this, like what Logiq was saying,
Exactly.
this X Cloud, those servers to build that shit out, the infrastructure is very expensive. So you're saying they're bleeding money right now.
I don't think Xbox or the Microsoft gaming division is, because I think they're getting money from places like Minecraft. But overall, if you just look at Game Pass, they couldn't have just Game Pass and nothing else. That wouldn't work for them. So and they have to strike deals with third-party developers and publishers to get their games onto the platform, and that's not cheap either. So they definitely need to raise that subscription count, and they will do that by brute forcing people onto Game Pass with the best marketing possible, which is basically the Xbox logo on any Call of Duty game. And I could see that being a win for them, having it multiplat, because even PlayStation gamers will see that Xbox logo and they will get used to it. Even the most, that had dug their trenches and they're so deep into the PlayStation ecosystem, and it's basically part of their identity now. And if they see that logo popping up and they get great games with Xbox logo on it, that could change things. And this is definitely that's part of this move. They wouldn't just throw that amount of money at a publisher even as big as Activision Blizzard otherwise. So this move comes from Xbox having trouble to break through. Even if 25 million sounds like a lot, it's go compare it to Netflix or to Spotify, it's nothing. It's sort of frustrating because it's a great service. So I totally understand this investment, and it was an opportunity that they couldn't say no to. And of course, it will just, that will boost the Game Pass numbers a lot.
I think Logiq had mentioned, because we were talking about xCloud, the targeted number of people they were potentially looking at, which you said about 2 billion. There's roughly 2 billion potential gamers that aren't in the ecosystems now because it's not as accessible to them. So that, I mean, if you look at 2 billion, how many of those buy into a $15 or $20 a month system if they don't have to buy a console? There's your 100 million plus, potentially, I don't want to say easy, but I mean, is it reasonable? It's not easy, but it would be easy.
Yeah, it's an interesting, and it's kind of, these numbers are sort of unfathomable. It's just crazy, like, just to get a grip on these numbers. I think that I might be wrong. I think Netflix had something like 214 million subscribers.
I'm gonna look.
I might, I think that I know that they just last month they got like 2+ million subscribers. So it's very interesting to see that people aren't discussing this angle to it, and they're like, oh look, Game Pass has 25 million subscribers, and it's great that they're growing. But where they are at right now, that must be really frustrating, because they have a great service and I use it. I think it's phenomenal, but they really need to break through with that, and they aren't today. But with this,
Sorry, I was at 2. It's 222.
222. Oh,
yep.
Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, and then, add the cost that it takes to make games over 5 years. So yeah, it's interesting for sure. And I think it's a great move for Xbox. It's a great move for Microsoft. And if you're an Xbox gamer, you should very much be excited about this. But yeah, it's very interesting that this angle sort of gets lost in the fold. That, when we're looking at it, this comes out of necessity almost.
I want to bring up something to you that I found in our research. I'm so glad you brought this up, Elegant, because this is interesting. Okay, we just talked about Netflix having 222 million subscribers, yet they had to borrow $16 billion to produce content. So yes, recurring. I talked about earlier that recurring really is the goal, and it can make more money long term. But this is the challenge that you face: is funding that risk to get to those numbers. So Netflix is, as of January 19th, 2021, Netflix was encroaching on being at the end of having debt. So that's how long it took them with subscriber bases in the hundreds of millions to recoup what they invested in the ecosystem that they have.
So one of the things that's curious, right, that'll drive some differences in those dynamics is that Netflix is a company that does not own its infrastructure, and so they ride on AWS. Microsoft owns all of its own infrastructure, owns all the CDN peering point connections, right, and is a software company. I mean, Netflix is a technology company too, but just Microsoft is that at a much bigger scale. So it might drive some differences in economies of scale and how they come through this.
Definitely.
I think one of the things that's pertinent for me in the Game Pass subscriber number is I'm personally less concerned. I feel like the critical optic in that number is not necessarily the increase in the enumeration of it, but the differentiation of it. A lot of those 25 million subscribers today are people who are already in the Xbox ecosystem. A lot of those subscribers today are people who already own Xboxes and play on PC. I tipped over the Game Pass did not interest me until it was unilaterally deployed across Xbox and PC. At that point, I was like, okay, now this makes sense to me. It didn't make sense to me when it was $10 for me to play just on Xbox, because that's not enough of my percentage of multi-platform. But when it became occupied 2 of the platforms that I play on, it started to make sense. I think I'm guessing what we'll see is more tiers of the Xbox subscription model. We've talked about how we don't know that, like, somebody in India or other parts of Asia is going to pay the $15 a month. or the $10 a month. But again, if they take this mobile gaming division and push its games into Game Pass, and there becomes a $5 tier for subscriptions, and again, when you spawn multiple SKUs, that has its own cost associated with administrating it. But that is, again, a possibility that if you're only going to play on mobile screens, does it make sense that you have to pay $10 a month? Or could there be an Xbox Cloud Gaming tier that is disassociated from owning a console that could be cheaper? One of the things that we'll be waiting to see drop is obviously this notion that Microsoft is planning on rolling out an Xbox that is a USB key, right? That you just slap in the side of your, the Fire TV kind of model, that type of thing. Again, those are incredibly low cost devices that enable cloud gaming, but allow you to play on a larger screen and allow you to play with a controller. So these are some of the dynamics that might be interesting for us to see, fall out of this.
Cool. I think we definitely achieved the goal of being fun. I want to know how fun it was. It turns out that Rain, who is 3 years old but acts like a little puppy, is a possessive little bitch and tries to steal the cat's little crinkle crinkle toy. She likes to crinkle crinkle too. So the bitch peed on the toy so the cats wouldn't get it. But then the one cat, Mushu, who's a little spicy shit, decided he was still going to try to bip it around. So at least, there's fucking that. But awesome show, guys. I think it was super educational and informative, and I think it's a lot of interesting stuff to think about. I'm kind of excited to hear what the viewers and the watchers think, so that would be neat. Definitely would love to get some feedback, and we have to save this episode as a receipt so that many years from now we can see where our predictions happened, and then when they get to 100 million subscribers, we can have a virtual party with Elegant on that. So as we're wrapping up here, if you folks would like to connect with us on Twitter, you can find me there at csmithshine, and you're already probably on my YouTube page or one of the Spotify or the places that you listen to it to. Elegant, where can folks find you to give you a follow on the Twitter?
They can find me at Elegant Place, and it's one word, nothing else. So Elegant Place, and that's my gaming space basically, or where I reach out to the gaming community and have a blast being a part of it.
Awesome. And Logiq, I know we've got a couple things. You've got the E2KG podcast, right, that you do weekly, and then Rounding Off Infinity YouTube on YouTube. We'll put the links. The links will be in Anchor and on YouTube. But unfortunately, as of right now, Logiq is currently on a Twitter break. We don't know how long that will last. But let folks know where we can find your podcast and your YouTube show.
Yeah, no, you covered it. You can. I always get this wrong. You can find me right here at the Enough to Keep Going podcast on YouTube, and you can find me also down below that on the Rounding Off Infinity gaming channel on YouTube. There's also a blog and website which actually has all the things, again, called just roundingoffinfinity.com, one word. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, where I have chosen to exile myself out of the land of Twitter, you can follow me there at GameLogiq, just like it's spelled right up here in the little label.
I didn't even have to look at that because I talked to you so much and you've been on so many times that some folks, I have all their stuff memorized. So awesome way to kick off season 2. Thank you both for being here and for sharing some great and logical, very intelligent insight, just as I knew you guys would do. And thanks everybody for watching and listening. Thank you for an incredible season 1. And thanks for joining us as we kick off season 2 here. And thanks again for watching and listening, and we'll see everybody real soon. Bye, everybody.